I'd been posting books that I'd been reading through the pandemic had been sort of a theme of my social media, although I'd say I had very few followers, so it was kind of remarkable actually that this tweet blew up at all. And I think in March, tweeted about the book, which is a book that documents far-left extremism mainly in Portland and Seattle in the States, so very niche topic, certainly for a Londoner. I called the book Important and the author Brave. Important because, as far as I saw it, it was the only book on the topic, or I think it might still be. There might be one or two others. And I thought he was brave because he'd, risked endangering himself to report on the topic. And
so, were you were surprised by the reaction? Before posting that tweet, you didn't think this could be trouble?
No way. It was just completely bizarre. I couldn't. It was unfathomable. Well, I mean, with hindsight, one sees now, oh yeah, okay, so it turns out Antifa and far-left extremism is one of those hot-button issues. But I didn't. I certainly wouldn't have done it if or maybe would I? I don't think I'd have done it if I thought this could happen. No, I definitely wouldn't have done it. I'd much rather be in a rock and roll band than this. As lovely as this is. You have extreme activists who then, pile on, and they pile on not just on Twitter. They change my Wikipedia page to say fascist. They then go for your friends with similar sort of behaviour, and it gets quite scary, particularly when your friends don't know what's going on, and it seems like if they don't know the topic, it's a topic that it's quite hard to understand, perhaps, given that it's so niche. So
the kind of word game was that...
Word game is...
Because it was against Antifa, anti-fascist, therefore two negatives make a positive, it must be pro-fascist. Exactly. That was sort of the argument, wasn't it?
Apparently. And so then issued an apology for the tweet and came off social media.
Can we just hear a bit more about that? So this huge thing is happening, it's blowing up. I guess all the band are getting calls, everybody's upset. And
there's like threats, so radio stations saying they're not going to play the band. Several artists, some of whom we've worked with, libelously accusing me of endorsing fascism. It wasn't just activists, it felt like the music industry more widely.
So at that point, what are you thinking? What are you worried for? It must be quite frightening.
Well, my priority in that moment is my bandmates, and who are, my best friends, and not only on a personal level, but also as well as myself. They've worked incredibly hard to get the band where it is, and even bands are a bit of a miracle. The stars have to align for them to succeed. So it's not just hard work. It's just it was incredibly fortunate to be in a band that's successful, particularly if that's what you love and that's what you want to do. And so I wanted to I respected that in them, and I wanted to protect them. And I was also open to the fact that perhaps I didn't know there was something I wasn't seeing. Perhaps there was something about the author or the book that I didn't see. I mean, thinking back, I wouldn't say I agreed with everything in the book, but there's nothing in the book that's bloody fascist or anything close to that.
But you sort of doubt yourself in the midst of the maelstrom.
Yeah, you absolutely doubt. If everyone is challenging you, the reasonable thing to do is to go, okay, well, maybe I'm wrong.
So you said, over the past few days, I've come to better understand the pain caused by the book I endorsed. I have offended not only a lot of people I don't know, but also those closest to me, including my bandmates, and for that I am truly sorry. As a result of my actions, I'm taking time away to examine my blind spots. For now, please know that I realize how my endorsements have the potential to be viewed as approvals of hateful, divisive behavior. I apologize, as this was not at all my intention. So the the language there is quite, it's strikingly apologetic, and it has that sort of has the tone of kind of being educated, which is quite often what you hear in these sort of scenarios. When I read that back to you, what do you now think?
I think that it wasn't insincere when I made it. It was an emotionally. It wasn't emotionally sober weekend, and I had offended a lot of people, so although I don't agree with it now, because I don't think the book is offensive, but.
So you don't? Do you take back that apology?
Well,
retract it?
I came to the conclusion after over a few months, really digging into it and looking at that my original tweet, where I called the journalist brave, and I said the book was important. I think that's a perfectly reasonable tweet, and over a period of time, particularly actually in that period, the journalist was attacked again. My conscience was really ill at ease, and I felt like I'd been participating in a lie. Not that that was specifically a lie, but after a while I felt that way. And furthermore, I thought, well, that apology now is to my name. So whatever work I do, whatever songs I write in the future, whatever I write, like if I write prose or anything, whatever I create, I feel like that might take away from that work a little bit, because art or creation is the pursuit of truth, and that's a wavering. Or it wasn't when I made it, but it felt over a period of time that I can't have that on my record.
So you felt these were big forces and had somehow in the midst of that moment had brought you to do this thing that you then regretted? Is that?
Well, yeah, definitely, yeah.
So let's fast forward a bit to more recently. So this happened earlier in the year, and then you were thinking about it, and then you came up with a new statement a couple of months later.
I did, and decided the only way to square my conscience and deal with the situation truthfully for myself was to leave the band, because inevitably I would get, how Jess just spoke about people she'd collaborated with and not wanting them to have the same experience. I totally relate to that, because I don't want them to have that experience, and I felt by removing myself, I could stand by what I thought was true without them feeling the consequences.
So now you've left, you're here, you can say what you like. Does it feel different? I mean, do you feel like a liberated person?
Partly. I feel liberated in the sense that I'm liberated from the feeling, the ill conscience I was feeling for many months. Now that the pub, there was a period of a couple of weeks where there was a lot of public attention, particularly from the press, which meant that I was quite anxious and nervous. But now I feel like that's past. Things have calmed a little bit. I feel a bit better.
So do you feel now you can say what you like? Do you feel like in this forum, okay, we're not actually just in a pub, there are lights and there's an audience. How free, do you have free speech now?
I've become very aware of, in a way I hadn't before, of PR. So, and ironically now, because now that I'm fun-employed, where it doesn't really matter as much. But so I would be careful publicly speaking to make sure I say what I really think, because I think words are important, and so in that sense, I want to be careful that I'm still speaking the truth, or what I understand to be the truth. So perhaps more than I was before, but I feel a freedom within that as well. So certainly, people with dissenting voices, it's costly to speak out. If you work in Hollywood, everything is the gatekeepers. So if you're an actor or an actress, if you want to get to an audience, you have to get through producers, directors, financiers. It's all gatekeepers. In music industry, it's like half gatekeepers. If you take an example like Morrissey, who, in my opinion, has expressed opinions beyond the pale, like support of For Britain, which is like anti-Muslim party, and he got dropped from his label, I think this year or last year. So that's the gatekeeper for him. But as far as I understand, he can still sell tickets. People want to see it. Is
that not true of you as well? I mean, do you feel like the majority of Mumford and Sons fans were upset, or was it the gatekeepers in your case?
I think that there are other musicians who were critical of me, and very rude and libelously so. Like I said, radio stations, and there's definitely repercussions for the band. So that's why I felt it was unfair for them to suffer as a consequence of what I said.
So you feel like actually these gatekeepers you talk about, so they're bookers who would put you on the radio, or people who would get you a front cover of Rolling Stone magazine or whatever.
Well, the music press is another thing, which another good example, because I think that they're an important example of gatekeepers, because that's a good way to get to a big audience when you've got a new album or whatever you're trying to get it out there. And they are almost entirely pretty left, and so whenever I'm going to get interviewed by music press again, or if I'd stayed with the band, this story would come up, and it would be a negative story. So it's like that's also unfair for the band, for them to have to suffer that because of something I think.
So this sort of gatekeeper class exerts a huge amount of power then. What can be done about it, do you think? Even if it's only a minority of people in the creative industries who want to feel free to think differently, do we need to be looking at alternative institutions and alternative music magazines and publications? I mean, how can you get past this?
UnHerd.
Gatekeepers. Yeah, well, we're here.
Before the experience, I would say I was quite against wokeism. And although I am still against wokeism, I'm also now more against anti-woke, capital A, anti-wokeism, in a way that I wasn't before, because I see it as, and I perhaps because the apology, I then got the anti-woke.
That came after you.
Came after me, and I recognised that they were behaving exactly as the woke mob, quote unquote woke mob, and you know, they are the thesis and antithesis, but I'm more interested in the synthesis in the middle ground. And I think that I'm changed in that I'm now quite cynical about that movement, more than I was before. I think remembering that we are all fallen, that we are all capable of fucking up, and distinguishing between words and actions. Because words, they might appear intolerant, but they can be criticized, but that's very different from intolerant action. I think that's an important distinction to make, but specifically remembering that we are all fallen, I think.